The desert sands hold secrets. This is the story of Moses and Pharaoh, a tale of faith and divine intervention. Imagine ancient Egypt, a land of immense power and grandeur. The Israelites, once welcomed, found themselves subjected to forced labor and unimaginable cruelty. Pharaoh, consumed by paranoia, saw enemies in every shadow. He resolved to crush any potential uprising before it could take root. Pharaoh issued a chilling decree. Every newborn Israelite boy was to be cast into the Nile. The river, once a symbol of life, became a watery grave. The Israelites were crushed beneath Pharaoh's oppression, yet even in despair a flicker of hope remained. A mother, filled with hope and fear, cradled her newborn son, defying Pharaoh's cruel decree. With a heart full of emotion, she set him adrift in a basket, trusting the Nile to offer him a chance at survival. Pharaoh's daughter found the basket and the baby boy. She defied her father's decree, offering the child a chance at life. Moses grew up as a prince but was aware of his people's suffering. He struck down an overseer, changing his life forever. Fearful of Pharaoh's wrath, Moses fled into the desert. There he began a journey of self-discovery. Moses witnessed a burning bush and heard God's voice. He was called to deliver his people from bondage. God tasked Moses with liberating the Israelites. Despite his fears, Moses accepted his destiny. The desert wind whipped at Moses' cloak as he stood at the edge of the wilderness, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Behind him lay the familiar solitude of the Sinai. Before him, shrouded in a haze of heat and dust, lay Egypt, the source of both his deepest pain and his newfound purpose. He returned as a prophet chosen by God to confront Pharaoh and lead his people to freedom. The hopes and dreams of generations rested upon his shoulders. Moses steeled himself for the task ahead. He knew the path to freedom would be fraught with danger, but the God who had spoken to him from the burning bush would be with him. Word of Moses' return, carried on the wind whispers, spread like wildfire through the Israelite encampments. A palpable sense of anticipation, of fragile hope, began to blossom in the hearts of a people long accustomed to despair. Could this be the deliverer, the one prophesied to shatter their chains and lead them out of bondage? They gathered in hushed groups, their voices low, their eyes searching Moses' face for any sign of reassurance. They had heard tales of his encounter with God, of the signs and wonders he would perform. They clung to these stories like drowning men clinging to driftwood, desperate for any glimmer of hope in their otherwise bleak existence. Moses, accompanied by his brother Aaron, moved among his people, his heart heavy with the weight of their expectations. He saw the toll that years of oppression had taken on them, the despair etched into their faces, the resignation in their eyes. He knew that words alone would not be enough to convince them. They had heard promises before, only to be met with disappointment. He would need to demonstrate God's power, to show them that their cries had been heard, that their suffering had not been forgotten. He would need to awaken within them a spark of defiance, a belief that change was possible. The air crackled with tension as Moses and Aaron stood before Pharaoh, their simple robes a stark contrast to the opulence of the Egyptian court. The Pharaoh, seated upon his throne, his face a mask of arrogance and disdain. "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel," Moses proclaimed, "Let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." Pharaoh's laughter, cold and mocking, echoed through the hall. "I do not know the Lord, and moreover I will not let Israel go." But Moses stood his ground, his resolve unwavering. Consequences that would shake the very foundations of his kingdom. a clash of wills between a defiant prophet and a mighty king. Pharaoh's defiance hung heavy in the air, a suffocating presence that settled over the land like a shroud. His heart, hardened by pride, refused to yield to Moses' pleas. The Nile, lifeblood of Egypt, became the instrument of her punishment. The river, once teeming with life, transformed into a scene of horror as its waters turned a gruesome red. The stench of death rose from the Nile, permeating the air, invading homes. The very foundation of their world seemed to be crumbling, disrupted by a force beyond their comprehension. Pharaoh, though shaken by this display of divine power, remained unrepentant. He retreated into the depths of his palace, seeking solace in the trappings of his earthly power, his heart hardening with each passing day. But the plagues, like the wrath of the God they represented, were relentless, each one a testament to the folly of Pharaoh's stubborn pride. From the Nile, the pestilence spread, engulfing the land in a wave of suffering. Swarms of frogs, slimy and grotesque, emerged from the river, their croaking a deafening chorus that echoed through the streets and homes of Egypt. They invaded kitchens and bedrooms, their presence a constant torment, a living embodiment of Pharaoh's broken promises. The land, once a symbol of abundance, became a breeding ground for vermin. Gnats, their tiny bodies a maddening itch, swarmed in their millions, their buzzing a relentless torment. Livestock, the backbone of Egypt's economy, succumbed to pestilence, their bodies covered in boils, their cries a symphony of suffering. And still, Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. He surrounded himself with his advisors, seeking explanations in the natural world, clinging to the hope that these were but temporary setbacks, inconveniences that would soon pass. But deep down, a seed of doubt began to take root, a gnawing fear that he had underestimated the power of the God he defied. Welcome to the epic tale of Moses and Pharaoh, Ancient Egypt's Secrets. In this documentary, we will unravel the mysteries and delve into the ancient history of Egypt, exploring the legendary story of Moses and Pharaoh. Join us as we journey through time, uncovering secrets buried in the sands of time. The plagues escalated, each one more terrifying than the last, a relentless assault on the senses, a constant reminder of the power that held Egypt captive. Hailstorms, their fury unmatched, lashed the land, shredding crops, stripping trees bare, and pounding the earth with icy vengeance. Locusts, their numbers beyond comprehension, descended upon Egypt like a living shroud, their insatiable appetites devouring everything in their path. Fields, once bursting with life-giving grain, were stripped bare, leaving behind a desolate landscape of broken stalks and empty husks. Famine stalked the land, its skeletal hand reaching into every home, a chilling harbinger of the suffering to come. Then, a darkness descended upon Egypt, a darkness unlike any they had ever known. It was not the absence of light, but a presence, a suffocating, tangible entity that seeped into every nook and cranny, wrapping itself around the hearts of men. For 3 days the darkness held sway, an oppressive weight that crushed the spirit and amplified every fear. Candles flickered and died, their feeble flames swallowed by the encroaching blackness. The sun, source of life and warmth, was but a distant memory, its absence a chilling reminder of the power that held them captive. The darkness that gripped Egypt was a darkness that devoured hope, a palpable manifestation of Pharaoh's broken spirit. Even within the grand halls of his palace, no torch could pierce the oppressive gloom. Every shadow whispered of the plague that had brought silence to even the bustling city streets, a silence born of unimaginable grief. For the final plague, the God of Israel had reached into the most sacred space. The firstborn sons of Egypt, symbols of lineage and future, lay cold and lifeless in their beds. From the humblest hovels to the most opulent palaces, a collective wail rose, a symphony of grief that echoed through the night. Pharaoh, his face contorted in anguish, cradled the lifeless form of his own firstborn son. The arrogance that had fueled his defiance, the pride that had blinded him to the suffering he inflicted, crumbled before the cold reality of death. In that moment, the weight of his actions, the countless lives lost because of his stubborn pride, crashed upon him with the force of 1,000 chariots. He summoned Moses and Aaron, their presence a beacon of hope in the midst of despair. "Go," he rasped, his voice broken by grief. "Leave this place, you and your people. Take your flocks, your silver and gold, and be gone from Egypt. Only pray to your God that he might show me mercy in return." A sense of urgency gripped the Israelites as they gathered their meager belongings, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. As the sky began to lighten with the promise of dawn, their dreams were taking shape, fueled by Pharaoh's broken spirit. There was a nervous energy in the air, a shared awareness that their escape had to be swift. With Moses at their head, his staff held high, they streamed out of the city gates, a human river of liberation flowing into the vast expanse of the desert. The Israelites, their numbers swelling with each passing hour as others joined their exodus, pressed eastward, driven by a desperate need to put as much distance between themselves and Egypt as possible. Their flight was a desperate gamble, a race against time and the unpredictable whims of a pharaoh whose grief could easily morph back into rage. Word reached Pharaoh that the Israelites, far from simply leaving, were fleeing into the wilderness. His grief, momentarily tempered by the magnitude of his loss, morphed into a cold fury. He felt cheated, betrayed. They were his possessions, and he would not let them escape so easily. He rallied his chariots, the finest soldiers in his army, and set off in pursuit. The desert echoed with the pounding of hooves and the rattle of chariot wheels, a symphony of vengeance echoing across the sand dunes. The Israelites, camped on the shores of the Red Sea, their backs to the water, watched with growing dread as Pharaoh's army appeared on the horizon, a glinting wall of bronze and leather reflecting the relentless desert sun. Fear, raw and primal, gripped their hearts. They were trapped, with nowhere to run, the roar of the approaching army a prelude to their destruction. The desert winds still howl across the sands of Egypt, carrying with them the whispers of a people's exodus. The pyramids stand as testaments to the power of faith and the enduring spirit of those who dared to challenge a tyrant. The story of Moses and Pharaoh is a timeless narrative of oppression, liberation, and the struggle between good and evil. It speaks to the human capacity for both unimaginable cruelty and extraordinary compassion. The Israelites' journey reminds us that the path to freedom is rarely easy. It is a journey that continues to inspire countless individuals and communities around the world.